Many people have died with the great ideas, but they didn't utilize them. Greetings to you all once more again. This is High Explosion Media. We are covering the story of Nimrod. We are covering the story of Nimrod this morning. In the Bible, we get the man by the name of Cush. And then Cush gave birth to what we call now the Cushites. In other words, the dark-skinned or burnt by the sun. Now, Nimrod was the son to Cush, and he was a great warrior. He fought so many wars that he won in many wars that he was engaged in. In other words, he was a warrior. No one will ever stand before him. As the time progresses, when Nimrod grew older, he married to his wife, that is Semiramis. And then in their marriage, Nimrod was still strong and going strong like anybody else's business, winning wars like anybody else's business. Now, my dear brothers and sisters, as Nimrod was still strengthening himself, gathering all knowledge, gathering all power, it got to the extent that he passed on. Now, his wife, Semiramis, thought to herself that I could not let the rulership out of my house. I should keep on being a leader to the nation that Nimrod led. So she devised the means of making up some stories. Now Semiramis made a plan to deceive her nation, the nation that she was leading, she left behind with, because her husband was now late. Now she said to them she is impregnated by the sun rays. In other words, she told them that her husband did resurrect, and after resurrection he impregnated her. Now that was the story that was said, and then that was the story that was taken right around Babylon and the stuff. And then Semiramis had a son, and then in order for her to keep debating in her family, she married her son. And then after marrying her son, that's where the worship of the mother and son comes from. Because in marrying her son, that means to us as the nation of God, it is abomination, but to her is for her to extend her rulership amongst her own people. Now, after marrying his son, so this son to Nimrod was named Tammuz. So after marrying her son, remember she has said that her husband has reincarnated in their son Tammuz. In other words, Nimrod is not dead, but he came in a different form and reincarnated in her son, that is now Tammuz. And it went on like that, like that, like that. That's where the sun worship came from, because she said she was impregnated by the sun rays. So in order to honor the sun, they tend to make it an idol. They then worshipped the sun. That's where the sun worship come from. And it will have so many names depending on which side of the continent, on which side of the universe are you coming from. But it has so many names. You name Madonna, and then of which it was said that Madonna was a wife to Baal. So in marrying, in other words, Madonna means my lady in Italian, and in Latin it is mea domina. So all these things are coming back, they are tracing back to the mother and son worship. That's where you'll get mother God, because people believed that there is a power that is entrusted in Nimrod's wife and her son, in a way that they should be worshipped by the nation around them, pertaining to the power, pertaining to the strength that was given, that was there in Nimrod's house. When she spoke about Nimrod, she spoke highly about Nimrod, because Nimrod was so strong. She then said to them, he is a man that is not going to die. That is why he has reincarnated into his son. So his son Tammuz, it's now serving the space of his father. Now, as we progress, like I spoke about Madonna in Catholic, My Lady, that worship came all the way from the Nimrod, because in the sphere of Catholicism, you will find that Mary has been worshipped, is been adored in a way of saying that he is the carrier of Mother God. The statues, or rather the pictures of Mary, will be kissed. There will be all sorts of rituals that are done in reference to what they say is their Madonna. And then that's where the worship of Mother God started from. And in Babylon, the very same king, or rather the very same God, it's named Inanna. That is it's the very same idol, but it has now a different name according to the geographic location of each place. Now in Babylon it will be called Inanna, and then Akkadians and Chaldeans, they'll call her Ishtar. That means Easter in English. That's where it is said that is the god of fertility. In other words, that's where when they tend to celebrate Easter, you will see the Easter eggs, you will see whatever those symbolizes fertilization, as you all know. So we as the children of God, we tend to celebrate Passover, as Ishtar is the idol that is worshipped by Akkadians. So in English, Ishtar means Easter. Now, of course, the Romans also accepted the Mother God. They accepted it in their religion. Then in 380 AD, Christianity was made official in Rome. But in which way? In a way that an emperor back then has converted all the pagan priests to become the pastors, of which is the contradiction. And then when they came and integrate in the church as being the pastors, there were some traditions that they were following that they were still practicing until such time that practices are welcomed in the Christianity. You name them, the practices of Easters and the stars, and the practices of worshiping these idols that are apart from Jehovah, who is the creator of heaven and earth. And that's where in 380 the home worship was banned. When it is banned, then that's where the large gatherings in the buildings was introduced. In other words, the churches, as you see, the structures of Christianity as you see now, is then that it was abolished. Is then that the house worship was abolished, then this collective worship was introduced to the extent that some people were even forced to go and gather in one place. In other words, that's where the church structure derived from in 380 AD, after religion, after Christianity was the official religion in Rome. In other words, like I said, the priests that were from pagan worship were integrated into Christianity, and when they got in, they came in with what they know, with their practices. In order for them to accept them, they tend to integrate their feasts, their celebration into the Christianity, yet turning it to be celebrated in a different manner. Now, likewise, as I am saying, even here at home, there are different names to the mother god that we get, to the goddess that we get, to the mother and son worship that we get, the Umkubilwanis, Umvelingan, you name them, Tlatamacholo, and all the stuff. Then when you read Jeremiah 7:18, Jeremiah 44, 17, 18, 19, that is the reference for some of this worship that we get now. Like I said, in Babylon, this very same idol was called, in Sumeria it was called Inanna. And then Easter that I've said and explained back then. Now, there is a part of African spirituality that have stolen from this mother and son worship. In other words, the wisdom, God created people with the wisdom. We have been given this wisdom by God. To name few, God has given us the creativity that in the minds that we have, we should create things, and things should happen according to the will of man. Let's see. In South Africa, there is what is called, in Mpumalanga province, there is what is called Inzalo Elanga. In other words, others are calling it Adam's calendar. It is said historically so that that's where this place that was used to determine the season and the times. Back then, there were no equipments that we are using, the advanced equipments. But God, given the fact that God has given his children, his people, the great minds to create, then they then made uphold the structures, uphold the caves, the stones, in order for them not to be lost in the seasons. When I was growing up, there was this thing of checking time with the shadows. And our elders knew the types of the shadows, knew the timings by looking at the shadows. Then they will be telling you this is around this time. This is now midday. Midday is very simple, but they were using the method of the shadows in order for them to determine the seasons, to determine the times, so as for them to be aligned with the timings when they were to plant. They knew it because of the intelligence that God has given them. When they were about to go out to plow, or rather to go out to harvest, they knew it because God has given us the intelligence that is built in us. They needed only the mind in order for them to align the stones that are put in Zalo Yelanga according to the plan, and they are aligned to equator. It's in Zalo Yelanga, the great pyramid of Giza in Egypt, and in Zimbabwe there is this great Zimbabwe, the place that was built there in and the intelligence that is seen in these places is so tremendous. It is so alarming. It is so unexplainable, because people back then didn't have anything to do with the equipment, the excavators that we have now. But looking at a pyramid, that's where people are getting it wrong. They are saying that the gods built the pyramid because even now they cannot figure out how it was built. Even now they cannot figure out how it can stand up until this day, not falling apart. That is now that is the intelligence that God has given to people. So people don't understand themselves up until you recover yourself, up until you know who are, up until you know the capabilities that you have. You cannot access certain points, because certain points needs you to understand where you are, needs you to understand your capabilities, your thinking capability. Because now when you cannot understand who you really are, even the simple thing that was supposed to be done by you, it will seem as a difficult thing, because you don't use your mind to the maximumity. Look, there is a scientist who said there is no rich place than the graveyard, because when you can go to the graveyard, many people have died with the great ideas, but they didn't utilize them. They died with the great minds, but they didn't utilize them. That's what I'm saying to you now. As we live on this planet Earth, let us utilize our minds to the maximumity. You will be surprised on how far you can go when you utilize your mind. I was explaining the greatness of the mind that God has given us, looking at this and these parameters falling under the 7 wonders of the world, or of the universe. In other words, the capacity of understanding, willing, comprehend the intelligence that was put in the pyramid of Giza. And then all these structures, when you look at them, they are same. They are at the same location. Yes, as I was explaining, the intelligence that God has given me. We're still in this mother and son worship. And then I was explaining that all these wonders that we get in Africa, they are aligned 30 degrees to the longitudinal line. In other words, they are accurate in a way that you will deem that the apparatus were used, the advanced apparatus were used to measure. But it was only the mind that God has given us, and then it was the mind that God has empower us with. We've got, as we still carrying on with the marathon worship, we've got the Venus, Queen of Heaven, Tammuz, we've got Ishtar, Nomkubulani, we've got all great of them. And then, as I was explaining, granite, pyramid are made by the granite, the second hard stone that you can get. And then dolerite rock is the third hardest stone that made in Zalo Yelang. And then when you get to Great Zimbabwe, it was invented, it was there 200 years before astronomy, but the accuracy that you get in there is so amazing that you will even think that they were using nowadays technology. And then, ladies and gentlemen, as we still carrying on, when they explain, or rather when they break down the formulation of the pyramid, they say that it can build, over 3 months, they can hire over 10,000 employees in making the empire, in making the pyramid, and then can make 30 empire states today. So that's shortly what God has given us as the stronger object of our life. In the Bible, God forbids us from worshiping idols. So whether it's from your tradition, whether it's from your culture, the Bible forbids us from worshiping idols. And when abomination is great in the world, that's where God will be furious against the nations. So that's probably more or less what is happening in mother and son worship. You see the worship today that you deem to be a great worship. You see Mary worship today. It started way back in NIMROD's wife and the son. Now this is Johnny Clady signing out from High Explosion Media. See you in the next episode. Shalom.